And what's your name, little boy?
Colin Madsen.
Colin Madsen. How old are you, Colin?
5. Oh, 4.
I wish still to this day I could just talk to him, because he was like, I don't know, he was just an awesome listener. Like he was always there. I could talk to him about anything. And I wish now I could still talk to him, but...
Yeah, he was kind of a person who resonates like positive energy.
And occasionally I just see this kind of lanky looking kid with some long hair and a big smile on his face wandering around, and everybody seemed to kind of just follow him around. And I was just kind of intrigued by it. And to me, Colin was, you know, the flame that moths are drawn to.
Yeah, I wish he could meet my kids and my husband. He would definitely be like in their lives for sure. Yeah.
Search is on for a mid-Missouri man studying thousands of miles away from home.
25-year-old Colin Madsen was last seen early Saturday leaving a Siberian lodge alone and without his cell phone.
I'm a sweet boy. He just got along with everybody so well. He was a real climber when he was a baby, an escape artist. I'm Dana Madsen Calcutt. I'm the mother of Colin Madsen.
Who's this? Who am I? Mom.
There he is. He was the most beautiful, beautiful baby. Sweet baby. We all wrote him notes about how much we loved him and what we wished for him. He was very interested in Eastern European cultures like the Ukraine, Romania, those type of areas. And when he went to the Ukraine is when he fell in love with the Russian language. So that's how he decided to go to school there. And he started taking Russian he took a Russian course at MU. And yeah, he loved that culture. He was really trying to figure out a way to get to Russia to learn, to be like fluent in Russian. That was his goal.
Colin was such a generous child with such a sincere smile, incredible laugh that you would never forget. And he also was really awesome with me and with other kids about how he would look at you when he was talking to you.
He was always interested in the Russian language, and he would like get on this thing called, what was it? Is it Rosetta Stone or something? Something for learning languages. That was since the first just like week in. I see him like learning Russian there. Yeah, he was. There was something about people, culture that really like interests him.
And we became fast friends. It's like someone that I had known. It's funny because I'm living in France now. I'd always wanted to go to France, so it was like kind of he really tried to ignite that in me. He's like, no, you can do it. Like you can go places. You can like go to school somewhere else if you wanted to. It would be funny to share that, at this point.
I know maybe what sort of feelings you're going through with things in general, and I've been through that too.
And so they did have a study abroad program for that particular school. They had some in Moscow and St. Peter's too, but he was just thrilled about Siberia because of the nature part of it.
Oh my God! Get up your ass! Get up! Oh my God!
first time I met Colin actually was in between when I first graduated high school and then went to college. Let's see, it was this program that took me to Irkutsk, and he was already there. He was doing his own thing. So I met him with a bunch of other Americans, and I don't know, Colin as a person, he is the most like organic, nature-loving person, and I'm sure this is gonna like very repetitive of what other people have said, but yeah, he literally would an orange peel, he would rub it as deodorant, which actually did smell good.
So imagine that you are a mother with a young man, 25 years old, going to school overseas, and you learn that he has gone missing. Worse than that, a number of days later, his remains are discovered, and you don't know if you can trust the investigators that are looking into it.
The 25-year-old Jefferson City man is missing in southern Siberia. Russian crews have been searching for Colin Madsen for 4 days.
So he went with my ex-boyfriend and then a couple of his Russian friends, and it was Easter morning that they were supposed to go hiking, and then I got a message from my ex saying, I don't know where Colin is, and then we were a little irritated because we're like, oh, come on, did he go on another walk and not tell anybody? Because he likes to go on walks by himself. But then as time went on, we were getting really worried, and then they went out looking for him, and then by the end of that day, or maybe in the middle of the day, I was like, okay, honestly, if I was a mom, or if I went missing, I would want my parents to know, so I emailed Dana right away to tell her.
My name is Gina. I've been friends with Dana for well over 25 years. She's my best friend, and really more like my sister, actually. First heard about Colin on the night of March 27th on Easter. Dana had received an email from Colin's close friend. By that time, I believe Colin had been missing for almost 18 hours.
Yeah, and then Dana gone and playing the next day, and then I did my best to help because, I mean, she's in a new country.
And then I was just, I just couldn't, he would never just walk off or do something like that, you know?
I was at work. I saw the story of it cross my my Facebook newsfeed, and kind of getting a feel of what the region was and the circumstances. I feel terrible to say this, but I honestly assumed the worst.
Yeah, I remember telling my husband, and I was talking to friends about it, and we're like, surely, he just got lost and found a cave or something like that. And because he's super resourceful, like he's used to that land and that kind of terrain. Like he loved it. That's why he kept going back. So, we were sure he would be fine and he would come up. But yeah, the longer he was missing, then, the more I got worried, and I called Dana and Mick, just kind of asking if there were any updates on what was going on. And I think that's when Mick called me back and told me that Dana was out there. And so.
Wait till we hear what his friends went through here. Two Russian friends of 25-year-old student Colin Madsen have made serious allegations about the handling of the search for the American man. They claim that during interrogations, they were wrongly accused of his murder and told they had committed sexual acts on his body as they were pressured into making confessions. Before he disappeared in the middle of the night, nothing had appeared wrong, they said. After returning from a walk, we cooked dinner and discussed tomorrow's journey. It was decided to get up at 5 a.m. to go out no later than 7 a.m. Colin prepared for the trip in advance, gathering his backpack, put in several bottles of water. He asked to wake him up just before the start of the trip because, unlike us, he was ready for the hike and wanted to sleep longer. He went to bed, closed the door with a key. The time was exactly 2 a.m. When they got up at 5 a.m., Colin was not in the house. They made a quick search in the yard and nearby. The friends stated it was quite warm outside, no wind. We went down to the river nearby, we briefly examined the shore, washed up, and returned to the house. Of course, we were worried, but we were confident that our friend would come back by 7 a.m. because he was a very responsible person. When he did not come at this time, we panicked.
I arrived on the 1st of April to Siberia. There were people there to meet me. I went straight to Arshan, where Colin had been missing from. And then I went to see the dasha that he was staying in, and then a policeman wanted me to see him in Kirin, which is about 30 miles away. So I went there to visit with him, and it was a very worrisome conversation, at least. I mean, he was not interested in Colin's health or the search. It was all about why 4 men were staying together in the same dasha without alcohol, and trying to get me to say that he was gay. I mean, he was so angry. You know, you could just feel the hatred.
I mean, I felt like I was under arrest. And the translator stood up and had an argue with him right at that moment. But I knew after I talked to this man, I would not see Colin again.
I kind of feel helpless right now. We don't really have anything that we can do at this point from here. We're sort of waiting. You know, every morning I wake up and I check the news hoping that it's good news.
Colin, if you see this, know that we're here, we're looking for you. That same day then I found out that there was an agreement signed for a non-disclosure between the university that Colin attended, where he had been attending for 3 years. That disclosure had been signed with the investigative committee, which is equivalent to our FBI. And then as I was there, the first day I even went to check on the closed camera footage for the town, which is everywhere. And they said that it wasn't working. I tried to request dogs every day, and the weather was unusually warm for that period. Like, I know that Colin's friends were out in shirt sleeves looking for him.
Siberian reports say authorities found 25-year-old Colin Madsen dead overnight near where he went missing 8 days ago.
I very vividly remember that day. I went home and I remember going up the stairs, and at some point I just kind of collapsed into a heap of a mess and just bawled. It's something I still remember very vividly.
A long and challenging search in the Siberian wilderness ended when authorities discovered his body a little more than a mile away from where he was staying. The disappearance left family and friends with a lot of questions, and us too. What we first reported started as a missing persons case turned to a murder probe late last week. Reports today say Madsen had several injuries which could be consistent with murder, but later reports suggest he may have frozen to death.
On April 4th, the embassy called and said that they had found a body that they were sure was Colin's. And I said, well, how do they know it was Colin? And they said then that they had found another body 2 days prior, and they knew that wasn't Colin. So there was another body found, and I insisted that I see him. I insisted. And so they brought him down to the middle of town in a parking lot in a little truck, and brought him out in a body bag, and that's when I saw him. And I could tell he hadn't been dead very long. I mean, his eyes were as blue as his fingernails, and they were clenched. He had defensive wounds all over his hands. He had no bloating. There was no animal activity. I could see his shoes were not on correctly, if really kind of at all. His underwear were pulled way up, and his pants were pulled down. And all around his nose and mouth, I could see that there was, like, it was blanched, like it had been pressed on. And then I could see broken blood vessels all over his face. And the first thing I said was, he's been suffocated. Then they took him away, and I was like, Nate, I want to look more. And they did not want me to stay long. They did not, they were just out in the parking lot. And they put him back, and then the next day, I insisted that I go in for the first part of the autopsy. So I had to have a diplomatic note. So I went into the first part of the autopsy, and I saw him there. They would only let me see him dressed.
Это потом же можете, все мы предоставим. Для объективности же и снимаем ваш.
So I was able to go into the first part, but they would not allow me to see him undressed. But I did notice at that time, because he still had rigor in the parking lot, that the rigor had passed, his eyes had clouded over. But again, I was never allowed to see him undressed.
Are you ready? Да.
Ready?
They let me take off his shoes because they asked for identifying marks, and he'd had some ankle surgery done.
Can we take off his boots? He has identifying marks on his feet.
Теперь уже задает вопрос, возможно ли снять ботинки, потому что есть особые приметы на ступнях.
Безусловно, конечно, конечно. То есть опознание же идет по приметам.
Она выражает удивление относительно того, что отсутствуют носки.
And he didn't have socks on, and he could not walk very far without socks because it rubbed on the scars. So I knew that if he was going outside, he didn't intend to go very far. Maybe the bathroom, because the bathroom was outside. And then the cannabis had already been out in the paper. I mean, while I was still there, this was before even the autopsy, there was the paper that he had a violent death, there were multiple injuries, and then right after that, there was the whole cannabis story.
For this case in particular, on the 4th of April, there are articles just ripping all over the internet about this case, all of them with different little pieces of information. But I can't imagine anyone in his family reading that title and then, reading statements like this at the bottom. Apparently, Colin Madsen, while intoxicated, went out into the woods and then froze, being unable to find his way back. I don't know how this type of media is helpful.
That Colin would smoke cannabis and go lie down and freeze to death within, around a town and not tell anybody, it was just ludicrous to me. And then when I saw him, I knew that he had not been dead that long, and he looked like he'd been suffocated. And I could tell that he'd been in some sort of fight. And Colin was not somebody that was inclined to be in a fight.
Is that true to say that that presented body indeed belongs to some American citizen, Colin Madsen? Ответ да. На ранее поставленный вопрос.
I asked for Colin to go to an independent forensic lab on the way back from the autopsy. And before we left for the autopsy, we had asked the police if the embassy and we could go out to see where Colin was found. And they told us that it was too dangerous and treacherous that we couldn't go. Now, later on then we find out it's only 500 meters off an access trail and a 1A. And at the top of the access trail is where all the police were parked. So one of the policemen wrote that he didn't understand it because Colin could see the lights of Arshan from where he was laying, that it was a soft area, and that Colin knew the town well. So we, instead of going to an independent lab to redraw his labs, we went to a state morgue. And this woman, again, was with us. None of the embassy people were allowed to go into the state morgue. So my son and I went in with this woman, and who had amazing access. I mean, she was able to call the police. She was able to, she helped us with our visas.
She actually had emailed you initially as well.
Yes, yeah, kind of a bizarre email.
Herself
right, introducing
good friend.
Best friend, yeah. And none of Colin's friends knew her, or knew her on a very superficial level, and didn't know that she was friends. So we went to the state morgue, and he went on to say, it was hypothermia and all this, and I said I'd like to see him undressed. And he refused to let me go in, even though he knew that I was considered the primary victim now as the mother, since Colin was deceased. And that's in Russian law, and that I was a physician. But instead,
then he told Natasha that she could come in and see him, and I said, well, what about me? I'm his mother.
And who is Natasha?
This is this woman that we think is probably a chaperone or, FSB agent or somebody trying to get us in and out of there. Mm-hmm. She's the one that was freaking out about his picture being posted right away because she just said, oh my God, it looks like he's been moved. And then she left the room, and that picture being leaked, started the whole thing off with people wondering, that looks really odd for someone that's been there for 8 days that froze to death. So that started it. And then I just knew something was wrong, and before I left, I wrote that Facebook post that was so unlike me, but I was so desperate. I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get help. I knew something was so much wronger than how awful it already was, that there was something else going on. And so they took us to the airport quickly.
So he was returned here on maybe the 10th. I can't remember, but I knew there was enough suspicion that I wanted him to have a second autopsy if they thought it was possible. And no one told me this, even though his death was under an active murder investigation. So when he returned home, he was in a very elaborate casket. He had very heavy makeup on, which took him hours to remove, white undergarments, and a nice suit. So they took him out of that and uncovered the makeup, and they felt that he had been beaten to death, and there was all kinds of strange marks and abrasions on his head and bruising under his eyes, etc., etc. So, and a lot of this part I didn't know, because this was right before the funeral, and I don't think anybody wanted to tell me. So the first phone call I get from him, the forensic person at the University of Missouri said, well, I don't believe in conspiracy theories. I don't know who would want to hurt Colin. They did take, it was kind of strange, it looks like he had 2 autopsies there, and they took out, the entire stomach. I don't have a piece to biopsy, there's no bladder, there's no gallbladder. And I said, why would they take those? He goes, because of those are what would be used for the diagnosis of hypothermia and toxicology. And he said, but unfortunately they left some fluid in the eye, which is the gold standard for drug testing. So he did that, and all his drug tests were negative. But he requested the evidence from Siberia. And at that point, we couldn't get it. The embassy just gives you a list of lawyers. And we just really could not figure out how to get this evidence. It looked like it was never going to happen. I had written to people, gone through the channels that I thought I was supposed to go through, thanks to Gina's research. And then another friend found an article in the Russian Criminal Code, I think it was 42 or 45, stating that as the primary victim, I could present myself in person and collect the evidence. So I went to Siberia one day and picked up with that. I just laid that criminal code on the table. We went to the police station. So when I got home, we sent them over to the pathologist here because he wanted to see them, and the report was due in 3 weeks to be finalized in Washington, D.C. So myself and my husband, Mick, and a neighbor who's a retired detective from St. Louis City, we had a meeting scheduled with Dr. Stacy, and we went and sat and talked to him, and it became apparent very quickly that he had not seen any of the evidence. And the first thing he said was this should have been done in Dover. You could tell that he said he had been overworked, and then he started getting, I think, he realized that, you know, he maybe should have biopsied the bruises, or, you know,
Sort of the enormity of
of just approaching it as a homicide, which he didn't do. And it's what another forensic expert said was the biggest mistake, that he did not approach it as a homicide. So also during that time, when I had looked at the crime scene photos, I had noticed that Colin had always worn a necklace that he couldn't slip off his head. And then when I was sitting in the police station getting Colin's effects, a man was standing next to me, and he handed out of his pocket Colin's necklace and handed it to me. And I really didn't think anything about it. But then I did realize it wasn't on the crime scene photos, so I went and got the necklace and realized there were 2 knots. So, and there was, the forensic person said there was a bruise there.
I'm a doctor, so I look at injuries, and Richard does the crime scene reconstruction, so he's more into the environment.
Well, what you see in the autopsy film is that she's manipulating the neck to get this in line with this here, and she indicates like, oh, the pathologist. Yeah, and they're trying to make it out like, oh, it's a vein. It's because the veins, the arteries and the veins are the first to get the marbling, the putrefaction. But I mean, I don't know of any veins running straight across the. Yeah. So this is. I think this is a hematoma. What they should have done is cut this open and look for red blood cells. Are they in the veins, or are they outside the veins? If they're outside the veins, then it's an injury, and they should have done that.
Pathologists should have done it. So the one in Russia, but after he came back, they should have done it here. Yeah. So we involved Dennis Pendleton's pathologist we work together with, and yeah, we do this. You cut open the body, of course, you do more damage, but you look in the hands, you look in the feet, and then you can prove definitely this was not something like an artificial thing because of hypothermia. This is an injury because blood is outside the veins. It means violence.
And you know, when I looked through the crime scene report, it said there were no witnesses due to the dangerous and treacherous terrain. But when you get the crime scene photos, there's people sitting comfortably all over with horses, everything.
So I agree with you. The state of the body is peculiar for somebody dying of hypothermia, but it's not deconvincing evidence. You cannot say, okay, he didn't die of hypothermia. And then what we do is we look at, we try to determine whether this is a dump site or the site where he died, / where he was killed. And there are some indications, some very clear indication that this is not the site where he died.
If you look, and we have seen thousands of crime scenes, yeah, as soon as these people are outside and with these temperatures, which was described and searched for, you would expect much more. The animals would not leave this body 8 days alone lying like this there. I cannot imagine that. I've never seen that.
And well, even if he would have been like this, and would have become stiff rigor in this position. When the rigor is gone after 3-4 days, then the body how do you call it? Ontspannen, relaxes. So you cannot deduct too much from his position. What I think is far more important is the distribution of the life force. I mean, that's without a doubt. I mean, this is speculating what we do about in what position he died. But the fact that he has blanching on the nose is irrefutable evidence that he was on his lying down with his face to the ground, because there is some lifer here. So on the places where there was no pressure from the ground, but there was pressure on his nose. And there's no indication why there was anything on top of his nose. So the only explanation is he has been lying face down. So if you just look at the crime scene, you see blanching on the nose, you see him lying on the back, then you know, big trouble. This is extremely suspicious. He did not die here. And even if it would be hypothermia, I think there are some indications that there was hypothermia, but that doesn't mean that it's not a crime. If you have a baby and you put it outside in the cold and it dies,
it's not a crime. So you cannot determine whether or not it's a crime based on a diagnosis of hypothermia. And then if you look at the other injuries, at the other circumstances, the poor boy is covered in hematoma. It's very likely that bruises, excuse me, that he has been grabbed. You see grab marks on his arms. So they were sort of determined to prove that it was hypothermia without looking at the circumstances, but any evidence that could make that diagnosis less probable, they didn't investigate.
Sometimes I'm not sure like if he's like alive or not. Like there's still like the notion of like I don't know what to make of it. It was definitely like the denial phase, then like the anger, and like I don't know what to do. Like how could this happen? Who did this? You know. And like this doesn't add up, you know. How come he's found like this like close to the area that he was?
I know like the first few days after I found out, like I don't know, it was just very melancholy. Everyone was just having, I don't know, it was hard, you know. And then there was a little memorial for him on campus inside the hallway.
So at this point, you know, I have experienced this portion of it on this side. And there are so many things lacking. Things that, you know, the thing in Russia is terribly disappointing and devastating. But, you know, over here, no one told me to get a second autopsy or recommended it or where, because there's no UN protocols. And if you had UN protocols in every state, then every autopsy under suspicious circumstances would be treated as a homicide or approached as a homicide, so it's done correctly and there's a standard. So that would have relieved a lot of that grief.
You know, I think they've just made so many mistakes and tried to pick up and go with their story, and every time it's refuted, it's like a game of chess, is what it's been like. Colin's death, and it took me 2 years of begging to get him listed on there, because they have to report deaths abroad, is reported as accident dash other. And it's because the Russians get to say. And who says the Russians get to say? It's such a blatant lie. And I have a blank death certificate.
You see the mummification of the mouth. You see that there's some injury around the nostrils. I think it's a reasonable assumption that for sometimes, I mean, and it doesn't take long, only a few minutes, and then they're dead, and you don't see anything of it. So I think it's a fair assumption that he was asphyxiated by smothering. And because he was held, you can see, I mean, he couldn't defend himself. A little baby cannot do anything, but this was a young, healthy guy. And if they do that to you, within 2 minutes you will start fighting, and that would explain the injuries he had on his legs and arms.
It really breaks my heart to be standing here, now having the best man at my wedding. He once saw me studying in my room, well, our room, and he thought I really should go for a walk. So he told me, let's go downtown and have a walk and grab some coffee. So, as usual, I'm the kind of person who just wants to get the coffee and go back to study. And he put his hand on my shoulder and told me, you need to stop and enjoy and listen. So I asked him, listen to what? And what he said, listen to the voices of the people and everything around you.
Colin, however, showed me through meeting all of these wonderful people from all over the world that being an open person leads to an open mind and leads to many great friendships. And I sort of blame him for my love of travel, even if I don't have the finances to do so. And also I thank him for
teaching me the love of other cultures and for making me want to do what he did.
I just really feel that at each step, the Russians and maybe the US government hoped that I would just quit. You know, once he was buried and ready to go, you bury him. But since I'd seen him, the reason that the embassy said it was the most complex and complicated case and unprecedented is because I saw him and I was there. I'm hoping that things will develop in Russia, and I may never know. I have a good idea what happened, and I think it's every mother's right to know. And this is Alma. All right. Okay. Go lie down. I know if you're in there long enough, huh? Okay.
I do have one more question.
Yes, go lie down.
Whenever we can.
Okay, Alma, lie down.
So there was a lot of negative press about Colin, a lot of attempts at defamation of his character. Tell us, what do you want people to know about Colin, the person, not just the case?
And maybe all parents say this about their children, but he always taught me something. You know, he just thought about things in a different way. You know, like, Mom, did you really need to say that? You know, what good did that really do? How do you think that made that person feel? I mean, he just constantly thought about things like that. Just like he always thought about, you know, the colors of light and what different spectrums would make a difference on different plants, you know, or the mushroom network, you know, that supported our earth and was probably good medicine. And, you know, he was just he was such he was a wonderful man. He was a great son. He was kind of magical, you know. And he was one of the sweetest people I've ever met. I can think of all the things that he did for me, the most loving things that, you know, we just look back and think, so blessed to have him as long as I got him.
Thanks so much, man.
Oh my god. But I promise I'm really nice.